Okay, so I'd like to welcome you to today's Talking Credit podcast. We're very, very lucky to have Bryony Pettifor with us, who is the director, I've got my book here, Director of EMEA Credit and Collections for Anixter, whilst also being Vice President for the CICM. Thank you for coming this morning, Bryony. And
my pleasure, Dan.
For Nic Crisp, who is also a leadership consultant, author extraordinaire. So thank you, Nic, for being with us as well this morning.
My pleasure.
So what we wanted to do is it's Wednesday the 23rd of September. You know, we've been through an interesting 6 months as leaders and as individuals, and our businesses have as well. So what we wanted to try and do this morning is try and bring in some different perspectives of how we could offer some value to those out there, particularly with everything that was announced last night as well by Boris, that it looks like we're going into another restriction-based guidelines, and the timeline he's given us is maybe 6 months, if not more. So I think that there'll be, you know, and if I'm brutally honest, I feel a little bit low this morning because of the fact that actually you think, well, okay, when is this ever going to end? And you know, I think that there'll be a lot of people probably feeling that out there as well. So, Bryony, would it be okay to maybe start with you in terms of try and give some reflection on how your last 6 months have been working with Anixter and leading the team?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's really interesting, Dan, because I'm actually feeling okay this morning because I look back and there's been some feedback actually into this. We asked for some feedback this session, and I hear a lot from other people, such as when this happened in March, we had somebody tell us that their member staff was working from an ironing board. They didn't actually have a table in their house. What has happened since then, and we're now 6 months in with another 6 months in our minds now, you know, people are going, okay, the new normal, which I actually don't like that phrase, but the new normal, how do we manage the situation? And I think the hard kind of the desks, the chairs, the working from home thing's one thing, but mainly for me as a leader, and what I read in the feedback we had was it's around the people. How do you look after your people and lead by example? So you're not on 12-hour days because you can, because you're in your dining room. And how do you listen and talk to and get that whole routine? Because for me, looking back, there was a massive freedom for our staff. So, you know, you're not sitting next to someone seeing what they're doing and watching them put their headsets on and watching them go for an hour at lunch. There was a freedom. So that was a challenge came with that, a massive challenge about how we felt about our guys, how they felt about us as their leaders. And then a lot of people know me, so you know that I'm really honest and open. That's the Anixter Blue Book as well. But just, you know, we're about, what are your boundaries? Set your own boundaries. We trust you. How are you going to manage your time? You've got kids going to school that need picking up. You've got people on furlough in the next room to you. So there was a lot of change there. And a key thing that came out, a phrase we've used a lot since as well, and continue to, mental health, physical health. It's okay not to be okay. And you've heard it in other network sessions. And I go on the CICMQ breakfast sessions and some of the things that they've been doing. It was really okay for people to say if they're having a down day like you just started.
Yeah.
So I think the whole move to sitting next to someone to going on to a Zoom call or a Teams call and watching people, so not being able to see them physically, but trying to gauge body language like we are now, looking down. As a leader, that's not normal. That's not empathetic. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've tried to we work with Nic actually, obviously, but we work with Nic to try and understand what could we do better. So it's giving people a voice, even if they're a little icon in the middle of a screen. Let them be heard. Let them say what they want, but make sure people are present and engaged to things. Still, one-to-one, in groups, however that needs to be. But that's looking back, and it now is now, and it will be the next 6 months. Nic, is that fair from what we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a massive test of mindset. And Dan, I really appreciate the honesty that you've just brought into the session, because I think there's going to be a lot of people feeling the same as you right now. And in some ways, every challenge, I think, and I mean this genuinely, brings an opportunity for creativity. There's always something, I actually think, that that can spark from actually difficulty, from failure, from challenge. And it's not, when I talk about mindset, I'm not talking about false positivity, of putting a spin on things. It's not about sound bites, which, this is not to become political, but, some of the communication coming from our elected leaders, you could argue lack a little bit of substance. And I think, I totally agree with what Bryony's talking about, which is the more authentic, the more honest, the more real you can be with people, the more likely you are to be able to overcome any of those challenges. But mindset has a lot to do with really understanding what's within your sphere of control and power and what isn't. And, really all any of us can do is really look at how we show up, how we look after what we do and how we are with other people, to make the most of a really difficult leadership challenge. But the rest of it, the best we can do is influence other people. The rest of it we have to let go of. There's bigger things at play right now, and I think leaders who really focus in on what they can do, what their people can do to serve their customers, do what they do to the very best of their ability, they're the ones that will come through.
I mean, do you think, both of you, that something that occurred to me as you were saying that, Nic and Bryony, is that, I suppose part of the battle is getting someone to be honest with you within your team and saying, do you know what, I'm not okay, or you know what, you can tell by body language that they're really vibrant and everything like that. I wonder whether part of the challenge is, it's almost like, I can imagine an ambulance crew turning up, and they don't go and an accident, they don't go and necessarily help the person that's wailing, they go and help the person that's quiet, because potentially that's more significant. And I wonder how we identify and how we bring out those people that are mute, dare I say, on a call, like you say, they're a thumbnail and they're not okay, but it's difficult to get them to be open to you about that and engage in that leadership and that camaraderie, that help that they maybe need.
My personal view, Dan, is it's the leading by example. So you own yourself, as Nic said. So I've just been honest. If I've had a bad day, there was one day I didn't want to go on video, just because I hadn't particularly done my hair. It was up in a bun and my hair was halfway down my back, and I just felt like I didn't want to be there. And I thought, well, that's come across on video. And then I thought, you shouldn't even do in the session. So I went on video with my hair piled up, and I just went, guys, I'm just feeling a bit like you, just feeling a bit flat today. How are you all feeling? They saw, they didn't see it as a weakness. They actually saw that as a strength, that I had the opportunity to admit that. And over the last probably 2 or 3 months, not since the start, but spent a lot more time one-to-one. Now that's the credit manager and their credit team leader with staff. Not talking about the accounts they're phoning, but how are you? How's your family? How's your dog? When are you booking some holiday? Because holidays, absolutely, we're promoting and encouraging people to take time. They're not flying anywhere or doing anything exciting. Yeah. Just taking that time out.
Dan, your initial question is a great one, because it's about creating an environment for listening and creating an environment where you lead from a really authentic space, as Bryony's just talked about. Yeah. But it is also about really noticing. And I think, say from your original from your question there that you opened with, noticing what people don't say is as important as what they do say sometimes. And yeah, we're all different. We're all very different, and there is no one style that is any way better than others. And there will be people in your teams as leaders that are very expressive. When they're great or when they're not, you'll know it. You'll know it from what they say. You'll know it from their face. Bryony's a brilliant one from that. You can tell exactly what she's feeling just by looking at her. But other people, take a little bit more time, and the introverts amongst us will will need to kind of go away in order to then come back in perhaps in a different way. So it does require a little bit of flexibility. It does require us to be more understanding, aware and accepting of styles that can be very different to ours, and how people communicate and want to be communicated to.
I know that some of the feedback we as Bryony said, we've put some questions out there to social media and via our network, and had some really interesting responses. And I think there was, as Bryony said, there was a little bit of a theme from a majority of those in the fact of it's all about listening. I think the listen more, talk less was one of the things that was responded. I've noticed that you can sometimes you get the ones that are happy to talk, that are happy to say that they're not okay, or you can tell that they're not okay and they're putting a bit of a picture on it and being overly wonderful to try and compensate. But then there's also, how are you? Fine.
Yeah.
How do you help them when they're hard to help?
Yeah, I think you've got to be really sensitive to it, Dan, and it is very individual. So if you've got one or two of those, but I think you have, for me, how I would do it as a leader, I would leave that door open and just encourage them in the group session or afterwards. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Something I noticed, so I did have one of those kind of May time this year. So a couple of months in, somebody kind of fell away from their energy. I felt their energy had gone a little bit, and I looked at their workload and it was massive. They were like Nic said, they were isolated. They actually live alone, so they weren't allowed to see anybody at that point. Yeah. And it was really getting to them. So I broke their workload down. So I had a chat with them about work, not about the personal stuff, but I just said, right, I just had a look at this. I feel you've got, and I always use elephants. Those that know me again will know I always use an elephant. And I said, let's slice that elephant up. We're just going to eat it chunk at a time. And we did, and we changed the purpose of their day. So instead of coming in and having, 200 accounts to call and difficult, because collecting money, let's be clear, we're in credit here, right? So collecting money at the moment is tougher than it's ever been. Yeah. People on the other end of the phone also sitting in their dining rooms on an accounts table, checks getting sent to offices where there's nobody there. So all of that pressure and that stress, plus the personal piece, was too much for this person. So I took the task and dealt with the task, which then I felt, and it did, because then since then we've had that open conversation because they came back to the right energy level. And then they said, you know what, I think that was doing my head in. And I went, yeah, I'm sure it was. So it was very natural. What can I do? I'm a leader. I'm actually here to do a job. And I broke it into the task, which then released the personal thing. Well, that's right or wrong. Like I say, I'm not the expert, but that's how I did it. And it's that enormity of this situation that was causing it.
It's bogging them down, and it's the whole thing. So you help them with what you can help them with, and then let them.
The rest then flow.
Yeah.
So something I just want to say on that. They felt, I think, by having the elephant, so having this huge amount of work, that they had to be, their little green light had to come on at 8:30, and they had to be seeing the and we talked about this, Dan, I think, a little bit. It's that level of trust. They didn't believe that I trusted them, and over time, over 6 months, and certainly over the next 6 months, that trust is massively changed, because I had it, but they didn't believe that I had it in them. Because I can see the results, I can see what they're doing remotely, and the numbers come or don't come. But that's a change. So sitting next to someone and then them not seeing you for 6 months, that trust has to be there, doesn't it? Nic, you're nodding.
Oh God, yeah, 100%. I mean, a situation like this is companies that are going to thrive in a situation like this are probably the ones that are going to have high levels of trust anyway. But even those that perhaps didn't before the pandemic, having 6 months of almost having home working forced on them, has probably, I would hope, meant that trust has increased almost by default, because we've had no choice on that, and actually, if productivity has either remained the same or actually increased because people have got a little bit of their life back, then that's going to be a great thing for empowerment going forward in those organisations. But that where you started in that, in that conversation. I mean, yeah, that's a brilliant bit of coaching from Bryony's perspective, because it's saying, okay, well, look, you know, what is it you really need help with, and using your intuition as to what you think the problem really is, even if they haven't expressed it, which in this case was overwhelm. And this, the moment you then break that down and it feels more doable, then the engagement automatically kind of comes back. One thing I would say though, Dan, is in answer to your original question, what can you do is name what you see sometimes. Like, I notice that you are. Sometimes people don't come forward with an issue or a problem, but then that's why, from a leadership point of view, it's really important to just notice and watch, and then don't be shy in just saying what it is you see. If there's nothing in it, they'll soon say. But actually, if you've touched on something which is actually a problem, then usually the floodgates open, and then you're in a space where you can work it out together. And
that's a nice way of doing it. You know, I mean, I wouldn't go in and say, you were quiet, you know, that's not my style anyway, but just the way that you said that, the perspective of, look, I noticed from, you know, you're coming from a, could you just, I've noticed that it might just be that I, you know, read into it and
exactly,
you might, everything's absolutely fine, but it's just, you identifying with it and giving them the opportunity.
Yeah, correct.
Just one thing, Dan, to add on all of this, I think one thing I've identified by asking certain questions is that people felt they were just expected to work. So we've been encouraging people to take breaks. I mentioned we also, obviously with my CICM hat on, I encourage them to study. And as Nic said, people are saving commuting time. People are at home but not wanting to then just turn around and be part of that space. So we've got people studying, and at CICM, we've gone virtual with exams and stuff. We've got a mentor program. It's remote. It was always there, but it's obviously even better. So in terms of having a credit person or a leader, so those things we're really, as me as a leader, I'm encouraging with my team. So this is perfect time for you to study, or for you to apply for exams, which you can do. And there's some spy comes through the camera and watches that you're not cheating. Don't know how it works, but hey, it works. And that's all. It's come quicker. We've been forced to do it. But the personal development side, they've gone, wow, you know, there's a succession plan for me, or there's a future for me at this business in credit. And it's definitely not, I just want you to get the money in every month, because it's really tough to do that. Come with that. It's thinking about the person.
The personal development, I suppose, you know, like you say, if you're taking away that time that you're commuting or something like that you can focus on actually developing that, their own betterment, if that's even a word, rather than necessarily the job itself. Or the company itself, then that's a new aspect that they maybe wouldn't have had the time for, and the company wouldn't have necessarily focused as much on that maybe in the past.
And I mentioned we spent a bit of time with Nic, so I got the leaders talking to Nic as well, because I felt having just me doesn't always work. But we've also got the CICMQ stuff that's going on, the networks, and there's some D&B cascades. We've told them about your webcasts, so we've encouraged them to go off and just do, you know, take half an hour, take an hour, go and do these things, listen to how other people are, because it makes you feel like you're in a society, a group, a network, whatever that is. I do quite a lot, as you know, on LinkedIn. Just encouraging all of that is not at my kitchen table doing that thing. You know?
I think there seems to be a lot of, there seem to be a lot of investment, I think, in terms of doing, you know, quiz sessions and doing stuff that enable you to interact with people, where you would have that physical contact in the past and you're craving for it, but at the same time it's quite easy to forget and just, like you say, become much more, you know, sign on at a certain time, do your job.
It's funny actually, you just flashed back to me one of the feedback we got, wasn't it, around a quiz and how much more they know about their staff now. Because, you know, almost like icebreaker questions. Somebody said something about fancy dress. You know, they actually went on Zoom in fancy dress. We've celebrated birthdays. It was the funniest one I went on, where somebody had a cake for the person on the other end of the Zoom, so they could blow the candle out and they could eat the cake. Now, I don't know if that worked.
Brilliant.
I like that.
One thing that you just sparked in me as you were talking there, both of you, is, you know, I had a client yesterday who I was coaching, and And she said to me, she said, I am bored of my own meetings. Like, I'm on Zoom. I just don't feel I'm getting the engagement back. And I just kind of got her to talk me through how her team meetings, her weekly team meeting usually runs. And, you know, one of the most, I mean, it happens to us all. We can kind of get rigid and a bit fixed and end up doing the same thing over and over again, which includes, you know, how we facilitate meetings, what we do, what we put on the agenda. It just it almost becomes automatic. And I think that part of what is really important is to introduce a kind of sense of freshness and creativity, which might include bringing someone in from the outside. So that's what Bryony did. I mean, you know, a month ago, and we've got it again this week, she invited me to come in and do a development session in place of a weekly meeting, which just provides a little bit of stimulus, a little bit of potentially some new skills and new ways of working. It might not be that, but it might be purpose it around a creative session. It might be that you get an issue out on the table that's really affecting everybody and you just spend the time. Let's really mine this and look at what is really the problem we need to solve and how might we do this differently. Just little things like that, looking at the purpose of the time that we have together as leaders with our people can be as important, and just mixing it up. Then they don't get bored and nor do you, which is really important if you want really, really great outcomes.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, Bryony, if you don't mind me asking, focusing on a credit basis, have you found that your team dealing in credit have had to act, you know, differently? You know, how has the job changed?
I think so. I'm very lucky, and as much as our customers are, we class them as partners. So we have a kind of tough debt recovery kind of, and we don't have a massive portfolio. But what we found is we're very empathetic. So we haven't seen a wave of anything bad. Let's say that. But from a team perspective in leadership, we've just said, you know, don't try and do the same number of calls as you normally do. Make sure you're taking time out and chatting to your sales colleagues, and you know, it's that business awareness rather than just hammering the phone to get collections in. Because it's really important that we stay as one. So if our sales have dropped, because they did, obviously around the whole world, pretty much March, April. So as the sales dropped, we had less to collect, but it was more difficult. So it's that balance really, Dan. And like I say, I think the freshness for me was very much listening to what they said they wanted. So I had a new start. In fact, I had 2 new starters in March.
Okay.
So that was pretty tough. They joined us 2 days before they got locked down. So, you know, I'm like, what do you know about our business? So we've had Nic on, we've had our sales VPs on, we've kind of brought in, the job is tough, collecting money is tough. So how do we give them more knowledge so that when they're speaking to a customer, they don't have to say, I need to go and check that with somebody else. They have that knowledge, they have that leadership, self-awareness, massive. So how are you coming across? What's your best? And make sure you're kind of holding that. But also, I can deal with this in the moment and I can close it out. So we've tried to develop our people so that they've got all of that and they're not hammering the phones, collect. They're dealing with an issue, closing it out and hopefully collecting at the end. But it's far more a business role than it was just a pure collections role. Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. And have you seen that from your network and from involvement with CICM? Are you finding that is fairly consistent with other leaders?
Yeah.
And credit?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're waiting for a wave in 2021, if I'm honest. I think when furloughs finish, when government grants start needing to get repaid, I think we're all kind of holding our breath a little bit, in the UK particularly for that. Yeah. But I look after the EMEA region. It is tough out there. But we're coming back to the whole leadership thing for me, I just am staying really positive. So I've stayed positive. I know I've got that 6 months view in my head this morning. And I'm going to talk about that on my call with my team tomorrow. So how we all feel about that. What challenges is that going to bring? Because in the middle of that is that wave of those repayments that I expect is going to hit us hard. How do we get ahead of that? How do we engage with other credit leaders to see what's going on? Are we best in practice? Are we CICM accredited? Are we on a par with the others? You know, or is anybody else stepping ahead of us? we're not competitively involved with them, but we are from a credit point of view sharing that. So yeah, I am a positive person. As Nic said, my face tells when I'm not, or I am. But genuinely, I'm really positive that we can make this work. You know, it's all about relationships. Communication is absolutely massive. Listening, all the skills Nic just talked about. To get that right now is huge.
Yeah, it's I was on a think tank scenario last week, and it really drove home to me that apparently there's 54 billion pounds been given, if you like, in CBILS and bounce backs, and the figure that shocked me was the fact that there are theorists out there that are thinking that probably 40% of that won't be paid. So companies are, you know, going under, and you know, those aren't going to be paid back, whether they're going to set up tomorrow as something with a UK on the end of it and that sort of thing. So I think the opportunity to keep a close eye, be empathetic, speak to your debtors, your creditors, you know, the whole network, to be able to understand what they're going through, and that sort of thing is just so important at the minute.
Yeah.
So, you know,
keeping everybody engaged in that, it is that supply chain. So it's your supplier selling to you, because they've got to keep that, you know, when we all ran out of toilet rolls in March, remember that? So the supply chain broke down there.
It's coming again. So
I hope they're ready. I hope they're ready this time. But genuinely, that's, whether it's in business or in our personal life, that whole supply chain, we need to all help each other. So it's keeping close to each part of that, like you say, really important.
Yeah, and like you've both said, really important to understand, trying to coach Nic, you know, trying to coach your team and try and help them through this journey, I suppose.
And knowing that coaching sometimes looks like asking really great questions. Coaching sometimes looks like providing a space where people can talk. Coaching sometimes looks like creative thinking and critical thinking, you know, stimulating debate and the opposition of different diverse views. You know, that's really important, you know, really minding for conflict in a team. And also sometimes coaching looks like challenge and giving people feedback or saying the things that need to be said with honesty, even if it might not be what that person wants to hear.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes for as much as customers as it does our people, you know, anyone that we work alongside, engaging people with and being flexible and fluid in that communication, I think is really important. Not getting too stuck in one role, basically.
Yeah,
is key.
Well, with that, I think that's a great way to you know, bring to a close. You know, thank you both for your time this morning, and also your feedback. And you know, we've had a couple of conversations. I know, you know, whilst we've been thinking about doing this, so there's probably a lot more thought and process that's gone into it. And you know, thanks again for feedback that has come from people over our requests from social media. So the last thing I really wanted to end on is how can people get hold of you if they want to speak to you directly? I'm sure that you're both okay. The mentorship of your coaching roles to if they want to.
Absolutely.
So,
LinkedIn is a good one for me, Dan. I think people, if they find me on LinkedIn, yeah, message me, link in, ask questions that way for me personally.
Thank you. Nic, is it the same for you?
Me too. I've got a website, but yeah, LinkedIn is great for me too, and then people will be able to contact me on there. I'm more than happy to.
Lovely, thank you. So we will have Nic's and Bryony's details on at the end of this as well. For those people listening on podcasts, then there's Nic Crisp and Bryony Pettifor, so please feel free to go onto LinkedIn and look at those some more. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Nice to see you.
And you.